Well, we'll get started here. Good evening and welcome to our In the Adirondack Library series for December. My name is Joe Dolan. I'm Marketing and Communications Coordinator here at Adirondack Experience. We're excited to have you. As many of you may know, the Adirondack Experiences Library is one of the largest, most comprehensive repositories of books, manuscripts, maps, and government documents that all relate to the history of the Adirondacks. So throughout this series, we're excited to bring you inside the library, at least virtually, exploring different aspects of Adirondack life, history, and culture. We run this series October through May, so we hope you'll continue to join us on the first Monday of each month to hear from some fantastic authors, all based in the Adirondack region. More information, of course, can be found at our website, theadkx.org. So, for our interviewer for tonight and throughout this series is Mitch Tyke. He's the station manager of North Country Public Radio. He's also the host of North Words. North Words airs the fourth Friday of each month on NCPR from 12 to 1 p.m. The episodes feature interviews, on-site recordings, and special features that remind us what makes the North Country a special and unique place to be. And it is my pleasure to now introduce tonight's featured authors, Gary and Justin VanRiper. Gary and Justin are the dynamic father and son team behind Adirondack Kids, a best-selling children's book series that has inspired young readers, including myself, for over 20 years. Combining their shared love of storytelling, the outdoors, and families, they have captivated audiences across the Adirondack region and beyond. Their mission with the Adirondack Kids is to inspire children to develop a love for reading and perhaps even try their hand at writing themselves. Encourage children and students to set down their electronic devices for a minute and spend time exploring the great outdoors, and introduce families to the Adirondack Park, encouraging them to get out and explore the wonder and adventures that can be found in this amazing 6 million acre park. So in a moment, I'll turn it over to Gary and Justin. They'll provide a brief overview of the series and their newest book. Mitch will then join in, ask some questions, and on that note, we welcome audience questions at any time. So please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Just click there and you can type in your question and we'll come around to it. So also be sure to check the chat for important links from Annabelle. All right, with that, I'll give it over to Gary and Justin.
Okay, well, thanks so much for having us, Joe and Mitch. It's been great meeting you and having some opportunities to kind of talk already. Hopefully this will be a fun hour and it'll move right along. Yeah, so next year is our 25th anniversary for the Adirondack Kids. It was that long ago that I decided, after reading a book, How to Raise a Reader for Life, and discovered that young people tended to drop out of reading in fourth grade and ninth grade, boys before girls, that while I had read to Justin pretty much every day of his life from the time he was an infant, I was concerned because in third grade and he's getting that danger time. So I decided to ratchet things up a little bit and asked him if he'd like to write a little story together for fun. And he said, sure.
Indeed.
If he could be in it. So, we have a camp that's been in my wife's family for over 100 years on Fourth Lake in the West Central Adirondacks. So we decided, set a story in the Adirondacks. He got to be a character in it. And we set out to write for fun. I was asked to read at a Parents as Reading Partners program, PARP at the time it was called. Now it's like Pick a Reading Partner or something like that. And I said to Justin, instead of reading something else that somebody else had written, I was asked to read because I had a community newspaper at the time at this event. I said, why don't we share what we've been writing? And so he introduced the characters and I read. And one of the parents came up afterwards and said, when's your book coming out? And we weren't even thinking about that, but got serious about it. And took about a year and got, what was it? Yeah, it was about a year.
Yep.
About a year. And I took my coaching money, I was coaching basketball at high school at the time, and invested in 2,000 copies, print copies of the Adirondack Kids #1, actually put a 1 on it, not even knowing at that point if anybody'd even buy one, honestly.
Risky.
Very risky. Yeah. So that this pallet comes off the back of a truck in front of our house, and we bring him in, set him in the middle of the living room, and my wife goes, okay, now what? But we had a book signing in a little independent store, and then we had one at Borders when they were still in Syracuse and when they were still a chain. And there were over 100 people in line at that particular event, and those 2,000 books were gone in about 3 months. So that encouraged us. We had to reprint #1.
Did you raise the price?
What's that?
Believe
I
it or
said,
not,
did you raise the price?
Took quite a while before
Yeah,
we
we-
actually did raise the price.
we did raise the price of the first one once, but then we didn't change it for almost 20 years.
Not until after COVID.
Until after
Not until
COVID,
after
yeah.
COVID, when inflation, I mean, paper went up, ink, everything related to printing. It was really tough. So, yeah. So then we decided the second book went well, and then we just did one book a year for 20 years, and up to COVID. And we kind of stopped like everybody stopped at that point. But we've sold over 180,000 copies in the series so far over that period of time. And #21 just came out, what, 2 months ago? 3
Yeah.
months ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Let me jump in for a second, because the initial idea was to make sure, Justin, you kept reading. Did it work?
Yeah. So I did take a little bit of a hiatus when I was, a punk teenager, but it didn't last long. I have always loved stories and reading, as well as film, and so a lot of that, yeah, obviously stemmed from when I was young, and that's carried on into the future. I don't read nearly as much fiction as I used to, but I still do a lot of reading. I love reading. I do a lot of writing as well. Not for work, but for other things. And yeah, and it's been a blast. And now my son loves reading, and he loves stories, and really enjoying passing that down, because one of the things we talk about whenever we go to schools, and how important it is for people to understand how to read and write well, not just if they want to be an author one day, but because it translates to pretty much every area of your life. We tell kids, if you want to get into college one day, right, you usually have to write an entrance essay and some sort of qualifying letters to get in, and things like that, or whatever it is they end up wanting to do. Even in my industry, so I work in IT and cybersecurity, I still have to write for my job. Like, there's never an instance where you're not going to have to use language, and the better you are at that, the better you're going to be at whatever you do. So we really stress the importance of reading and writing, and particularly a love for those things, because of how impactful it is on someone's life.
Do the two of you remember what it felt like to have gotten this first book out into the world, and then you show up at a book reading and signing, and there are 100 people lined up to get their copies signed?
Yeah, so I was a little nervous. They had us.
And you were how old at this point?
11. I think I was. Yeah, I just turned 11. And they had asked us to. We were reading or speaking or something. We were going to read a chapter, if I remember. And so they asked me to stand up and say something, and I'm all timid and nervous and awkward, and it was an uncomfortable um, moment. But as the years went on, going to schools and things like that, I got very comfortable, to the point where, as a young teenager, preteen kind of age, I was too comfortable in front of the audience, and and I would tell kids, oh yeah, me and my parents get in fights all the time, and about writing, and they're like, no, we got to find a better way to present yourself a little
Editorial
bit.
disagreement.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what we have.
So there's a learning curve with all those things, and all the things involved with being a kid and trying to do normal life stuff as well. But yeah, it was a nerve-wracking experience at first, but it's only been to my benefit over these years. Being able to speak, public speaking, and things like that have been really helpful in my career and in our lives.
Yeah, I think it was the moment when in one of the, I think it was at a teacher's conference or a writer's conference, something like that. And Justin was, talking just very normally. And while he's talking, he's stretching. He was so comfortable, right? So we talked about that afterwards. Let's just talk a little bit more about, stage presence.
It's those moments, when you're laying at bed at night and you think back about those awkward moments in your life and it makes you cringe. It's like, why did I ever do that? Yeah.
And I'll tell you, there's also honestly tender moments too, when with the memories. And at one point Justin said, "You know what, Dad, it's a little bit mushy, maybe you won't, mention those publicly." But it was just
But here we are.
yeah, but here we are. Yeah. Yeah. But a lot of parents, dads, they play catch, and we did things, father and son would do. This was just part of our lifestyle, to do some writing, one a year, and we just kind of knew we had kind of a schedule, but we weren't stage parents, my wife and I. It was like, you can stop anytime you want to. And actually, Justin's son now, as I mentioned, Levi, we had an appearance on Watertown, WPBS, and it ended up showing on television, all this streaming now and everything, there's all these venues things can show up on. So Levi wasn't with us, and he watched that on television, and he looked at me and he said, "Papa, you and Dad did a series. We're going to do a series." And I said, "Okay." So, he was serious about it. And we actually just finished our first book, and it's being illustrated right now. So we hope it'll be out next year.
Can you paint a picture what writing for the two of you looked like and felt like? Because it's one thing to say that you collaborate on these things, but bring us inside your house from 20 or 25 years ago when the creative process was happening.
So we're in the same office that we've been in. It did move once upstairs, but then it came back downstairs. But it's changed every single year depending on our life circumstances. As a kid, I would sit right next to my dad in the corner over here on the computer, and we'd be talking about what we wanted to write, and then he'd write it out, and I'd stop him every 10 seconds. Every time he misspelled something. Sure, was maddening. But I'm grateful he has the patience of a saint.
Levi's doing that right now.
Yeah.
Must be a genetic thing.
Yeah. But we would sit there and we'd write through the story together, and we tell people that, like, he would write a word that was real long, and I'd say, "Dad, my friends aren't going to understand what that means," and he'd say, "Well, come up with a synonym," right? And so we'd work through the story together that way. And as I got older, there'd be different types of involvement. At one point, we did a collection of short stories for our one of our books, our 15th book, and there's 5 stories in it, and I wrote 2 of them. He wrote 3 of them, and then other stories have been primarily written by him, and I've just been sort of a collaborative, creative mind on the work, but helping with research and things like that. But just because of my work and things like that, I just haven't been able to write directly with him for several books. So, on the bottom, we'll say, like, created by Justin and Gary, story by Gary, things like that. So it's just changed depending on the year. And, I have 2 children now and 1 on the way. And so, things are a little bit crazy, just the way life is,
Yeah.
But
yeah, this is our first notebook. Still have our first notebook. And we like to show the kids the outline, the original outline to our second book, Rescue on Bald Mountain, and show them how, how absolutely careful we are with what we write down and so on. And maybe you can kind of see that. And so really we'd sit down and brainstorm and go, okay, well, how's this story going to go? And we know how a story is going to begin and end before we even sit down at the computer and have a good idea of how we're going to get there. And some of the actual chapter titles on this first outline are actually the chapter titles in the book itself.
Yeah.
So that's all part of the process as well. Doing the research, deciding what we want to write about, doing the research, and then working on our outline, any new characters that might come in, so that they're real to the readers, so that real to us, so they're real to the readers, and then actually do the grunt work of writing and then proofing as well.
Well, speaking of the characters, for folks who might not be familiar with the Adirondack Kids series, can you paint a picture of your protagonists?
Yeah.
In fact,
A literal picture in this case.
Yeah. So
I don't know, I might get a reflection.
yeah, let's see
on
here.
that.
I
Do
got
do
it.
with this.
No, I got it. I got
Okay.
so the main character was originally based on myself, Justin. Yeah. Um, like my dad already mentioned, when I was, you know, 9, 10 years old when we started talking about the books, I thought, hey, how cool would it be if we're ever famous, right? That I could be in a book. And so we created the character Justin, Justin Robert. My middle name is Robert, and so he was a character loosely based on myself. Um, we had a lot of things in common: love for the outdoors, love for the Adirondacks, love for animals, love for Reese's peanut butter cups, right? And so we
And this here?
and I yeah I
hold
we
it.
have bucket. Oh no,
Hold
he's
that
got
a
some,
second.
right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
got some.
So for whatever reason, as a kid, I thought, oh, these hats are pretty cool. Let me get these. Let me get a couple of bucket hats here. And so I had a collection of bucket hats that I used to wear.
Bartholomew, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Bartholomew.
you're leaning that back, and I'm seeing that as actually a jigsaw puzzle.
It is, yes,
Yeah.
actually, yeah. This is but we'll get to that here.
All right.
So
Spoiler alert.
yeah. And then we wanted a character who's going to be humorous. So we created this character, Nick. He loves eating. He loves food. He loves uh, pirates, and he would often drop his fishing pole into the lake and do all kinds of things, messing up words when he's speaking. And so we love to laugh. We've done tons of laughing in our day. So um, we thought we have to bring some comedy to the story. So we created Nick, and then Jackie. We wanted not just boys to read our stories, but girls too. And so we created the character Jackie, who's she's a very outdoorsy, very capable, very smart young girl, and they're best friends. And then of course we have the cat Dax, short for Adirondacks, that everybody loves. And we actually did have a real Dax for 17 years. That was just like this cat here. And so yeah, Dax was a wonderful addition to the family for a long time. And so yeah, and people always ask us, are the characters real? And we have to tell them, unfortunately, no. We did make up these characters, but uh, part of the process of writing is knowing these characters so well that when people read them, they feel like they're real, right? So we have information about these characters that nobody will ever know, because we know them so well. They're like real people to us, and so we have. Surprised we haven't written like a little, they call it a Bible, right, of all your
Yeah.
of all your stuff. But we essentially have that. So yeah, we've loved creating these characters, and it's a lot of fun. And yes, that's a puzzle. My son Levi loves doing puzzles. He didn't get that from me. Definitely got that from this guy. But he loved doing puzzles. He's excellent at doing them. He does them like he could do them upside down. He's throwing them together, putting the pieces in. Frustrating my dad because he's so efficient at it. And he's doing 1,000-piece puzzles at 6 years old. And so we thought, hey, we love our artwork. Let's make a camp puzzle that people can buy. And so we took our poster artwork. We actually updated it a little bit. We replaced Jackie's outfit there, and just kind of made it nice. Put a new font on it. And yeah, it turned out beautifully. It's a 500-piece puzzle, and it's very high quality, and it's a beautiful piece of artwork when it's done, which is why we have it framed. And yeah, shop AdirondacKids.com. You can
Well, and you just described it as a camp puzzle, and for a lot of people, that's really part of the equation for them, is going someplace and spending time outdoors. And when they're not outdoors, they're all together in their camp, their cabin, their cottage, whatever. And it's another thing, just like the books, that's not an electronic device.
Exactly.
Right.
That was definitely part of our thinking too. And during COVID, so many people were doing puzzles, and that's when we took the time to actually invest in that and do that as well. Yeah.
It's interesting. The writing effort is a family affair, and I would imagine that these characters really feel like family to you at this point.
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was getting the hats and so on. I don't know all what Justin might have been exactly saying, but models, we used at the time one of his best friends so that our illustrators would have something to work with.
Yeah.
And Jackie is a cousin, from up at camp and so on. But yeah, for their personalities and everything. And Mitch, years ago, I remember hearing authors talking about characters writing themselves. And I was trying to imagine that. And I was always nonfiction oriented. When I started writing with Justin, I didn't even know if I could do fiction. What I found was, because I was so nonfiction oriented, had a community newspaper co-owned for 7 years, and but that helped keep the fiction plausible. And so it was a happy learning experience, to find out. And then the characters, like Justin was saying, we got to know them so well that eventually, when they were in a situation and they were interacting with each other, we knew what they were going to say to each other and what they were going to do.
Yeah.
So it was just really cool to make that discovery, and now to sit down, we wonder what Jackie and Nick and Justin are up to, and what's sitting down for the next story. And basically now they write themselves.
Yeah.
We actually we've already gotten a question in the Q&A, and I want to encourage folks as we have this conversation over the next 40 minutes or so. If you have questions for Gary and Justin, just drop them in the Q&A. If you forget and put them in the chat, I'll find them there as well. But this, I gather, is a question for both of you from Joy, who wants to know from each of you, what is your favorite book ever? I guess children's or otherwise.
Oh wow, go ahead.
Oh boy.
It could be the marvelous moose call contest.
It could be. It could be. That's a difficult question. Besides of course, of course we would say the Bible is our favorite book, but if we're speaking of our favorite books, that's a tough call. I mean, I was big into the Lord of the Rings as a young man. I was big into the Brian Jakes Redwall series of books, which are really tremendous. I read Narnia. I read, all the great fantasy stories of our time, and and I read a lot of stuff. But probably in my top favorite would be Tolkien and Lewis, for sure. But man, those Adirondack Kids books they're pretty tremendous.
Gary, what about you? What books have inspired you over the years?
Yeah, wow, there's so many. I mean, when I think back to the children's stories that I read, when I was a kid and then passed on, Beverly Cleary, was just outstanding. Henry Huggins, I read those. Actually, for I guess you say nonfiction, or a writer that I really appreciated through the years and I loved, was Annie Dillard. Annie Dillard, who wrote a number of books. Not this one, let's see. I love them all, but
this isn't a backdrop. This is a real.
Yeah. Pilgrim at Tinker's Creek. I read that and I was like, wow, you can write like that, and so kind of following her and her writing, just a phenomenal writer. Yeah. And as for our own books, because people often ask that too, Justin used to say the last one, like you were saying, marvelous, the last one that we worked on, but tell him what your favorite one became.
Yeah, so whenever we write our books, right, we do live research. We go and we do the thing we're going to write about so that we can write more accurately about it and really give you a sense of being there. And so we were approached by a scuba instructor named Andy Beach, who best name for a scuba instructor, by the way, Beach. And he said that there's something at the bottom of Blue Mountain Lake that I think you'd find very interesting. And so we got talking about diving, and of course we decided to write a story on that. And being the only one of the pair that can swim, I volunteered to to do the scuba course, at least the introduction to diving, just so I could accurately describe what it feels like to dive. And I fell in love with it. I thought it was awesome. So I got certified with Andy, and we've done several dives together, and really loved that experience, and still do. And so yeah, that story became kind of a special story to me, because it was a really, we've all these experiences have been awesome, right? The train and the hiking and things like that, but there was just something in particular about
There he is, right
about
there.
diving that yeah, there was just something in particular about that I really enjoyed, and it was a very, very awesome experience. So yeah, I loved. Actually, yeah, you can see there's the course. There I am in my introduction course there, and back when I had hair. Yeah, it was a great time. So yeah, that's probably mine. And you had mentioned what's your favorite Adirondack Kids book?
Well, I have several, but probably the 20th book. I was waiting because you can enter our series anywhere you want, because we knew young people might like pirates or trains or whatever. But I had to wait for the season to come so we could do the 20th book, which is called The Amazing Migration Vacation. And in this book, we had to go, my wife and I somebody had to suffer and do this research, right? It's all part of it. So we had to go to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, because that's where we set the book. And the Adirondack kids in this story meet the Carolina kids, because our loons from the Adirondacks go to the coast. They'll go to the coast of Maine, the Cape, Long Island, the Cape, the Outer Banks, and Florida. One, they put a little satellite thing, or however they do that. One went to Florida. So I really wanted to write to kind of teach without preaching about migration in the story, because that's what we do with every story. We take some important person, place, or thing in the Adirondacks, and then, wrap a story around it. So our loons go there. So in this story, the Adirondack kids meet the Carolina kids, and there's a common loon on the beach, and the Adirondack kids say, "Oh, look, there's one of our loons." And Carolina kids overhear them and say, "Wait a minute, that's our loon." And then they have their exchanges, and friendship, comes from it, and so on. So that's probably my favorite one, if I had to pick one.
We have a couple more. Actually, one of the folks who's in the audience has a whole bunch of questions. This is Kathy, who asks, and I'm going to try to interpret the first sentence. Did they actually climb Bald Mountain? Is the Tamarack Cafe real? Is Justin actually scared of heights? Was the crazy lady and her daughter based on real people? And what are your favorite animals? Do you want to start with the last one first?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Boy, growing up, I was a cat guy. I had a number of cats, mostly because I wasn't allowed to have a dog. But no, I really enjoyed the cats that we had. In particular, Dax was a wonderful. She was a wonderful animal. But in terms of my favorite animals, probably a honey badger.
Mm.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
Yeah.
Birds for me.
Yeah.
I've been photographing birds for over 20 years too, and spent a lot of time in the water with a common loon, kind of doing their life history, because our camp's surrounded by lakes that have loons in them. But they're fascinating creatures. So almost any bird. But
Kathy didn't ask me this question, but I was going to volunteer. I'm a big fan of river otters. If I could be a river otter at some point, I would. I think it would be very enjoyable. What about these other questions? The Tamarack Cafe, being afraid of heights. I don't know of the crazy lady and her daughter, but are they real people?
I had a person in my head for the crazy lady, but I'm not going to say who it is, because I want her to stay. Right. So, but yeah, just got that idea, from
Yeah.
thinking about, so that just came out of the imagination pretty much.
Yeah.
Are you
Justin,
scared?
are you afraid of heights?
I have a healthy respect of heights, but I'm not afraid of them. I've actually done quite a bit of flying.
Mm.
I volunteered with the Civil Air Patrol for a long time, and I really enjoyed my time in the air with them. Most recently, I took a flight over Big Moose Lake, which was a blast. Got some great photographs. So I love being in the air. I think it's awesome. Um, but I'm not a psychopath. I don't want to jump out of the planes, you know. So I have a respect of heights, certainly, but no, I'm not scared of heights.
I really was. I was really scared of heights. And when a friend asked me to climb Mount Marcy to photograph the senior pictures of his daughter, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But being out there, especially when you get above the tree line, and you've got the bend, right? You've got, but it's like it's just the literally the earth at your feet and the clouds above, and you feel suspended almost. And but that led to a love of hiking the Adirondacks, and I've hiked a lot of them, including the 46, and I love it. So that really helped me get over a fear of heights. But like Justin said, still have a great respect, for it, and been in some potentially dicey places hiking in the high peaks. So
Yeah.
it's really careful about that. So it wasn't too hard to imagine Justin being scared of heights.
I always tell people it's not falling from heights that kills you. It's the stopping that does.
Right. It's the sudden stop at the end, right?
Oh, the Tamarack Cafe, up until this year, yeah, that was real at the time. When you see illustrations of it, just like so many places in the Adirondack Park, that have a lot of years and a lot of history, and then things, just incredible environments. Our understanding is right now the Tamarack had been sold and somebody has purchased it. It's closed right now. We don't know what it's going to look like next year in 2025.
Tremendous breakfasts.
Oh yeah,
Tamarack Cafe.
yeah. There's such a cool atmosphere and
Yeah.
environment, and that's right in literally our neck of the woods, where the epicenter for the books, where the kids hang out. And
Did we actually climb Bald Mountain?
actually, yeah, how many times would you say we've climbed Bald Mountain
20, 30? I don't know.
over the years?
Yeah.
Is that what happened to your hair?
It is, the more
Mine
times
too,
you go
but for
up,
that matter.
the more you go up, the more it recedes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of ground zero for locations, we have not really talked about this latest book. I was hoping you might share just a little bit about the Most Marvelous Moose Call contest, which is, of course, based on an actual event.
Yeah. So just before COVID, this was going to be somebody that followed us around. Wonderful family.
That sounds
What?
creepy when you say it.
Well, wonderful family, and they have a camp in Indian Lake, and they told us about this moose contest that we had never heard about, and the Great Adirondack Moose Festival. And so I said, you might really want to come to that. Maybe you'd do a story on it. So we went just before COVID, the year before COVID, and it was a riot. I mean, it was a lot of fun. And it's like, yeah, there's definitely a story here. Well, then COVID hit, the delay, and what are we, 2 years out now, 2024. So my wife and I went again, and really connected with Ed Keynes, who was fantastic person and guide, and knowledgeable about natural history and all the rest of it, and is a host of that event. And once again, my wife hadn't seen it the first time. She goes, that was an absolute riot, right? So took more notes, took more photographs, spent a little more time in the community. So we had 2 research times there, and references, and then got to work on the story. So finally, this was the results of it finally coming out. And we went to the Great Adirondack Moose Festival, set up as vendors, because now we had the book, another book on moose. We had 2 books on moose, and went
And
to
then I gather
the
life
contest.
imitated fiction, right?
Well, that's literally what happened because
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
people go ahead.
Ed approached us and said, "Hey, we haven't had a lot of people sign up for the contest this year to participate."
They have a children's and an adult version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we said, well, no way. We're not doing that. We've never done it. And he was like, "Oh no, please, you got to help us out. Like
He was
at the very
gracious.
least,
Yeah.
at the very least, it'll be entertaining and so come on up, like please, please." As we said, "Okay, all right,
He
we'll
didn't
do it.
he didn't
We'll
beg.
do it." No, he
He
didn't.
didn't beg.
But
He said, "I don't want to twist your arm, but could you?"
yeah. And so we sat there and while they were talking and doing the introduction, we were practicing in our seat next to us.
The video.
The video is going with moose calls.
I go, what does a moose sound like?
Yeah, no idea. And so we're practicing, in the seat right next to each other. And finally he calls us up. My dad goes up and then I go up after that. And at the end when several other people went out, several people did sign up actually. We were not the only ones. And so several other people went and we were like, oh, they did way better than us.
That one girl was sounded just
yeah.
like the video. Yeah.
And so they get to the end when they're announcing the winners and they do third place and then they do second place and my dad gets called up for second place.
Ta-da!
And so we're like, holy
Look what I
smokes,
got.
how great is that? That's wonderful. And then they call first place and then they called me up. And I was like, are you kidding me?
So people are going to say this was fixed.
They're gonna think it's rigged.
It was rigged.
Yeah. So yeah, we won first and second at the Moose Call contest.
I want to
Which is
encourage
why,
anybody, Mitch, that's listening though, or comes across the interview here, to go next year
It's so
or
much
go.
fun, yeah.
Every participant got one. Whoops, here we go. Well, every participant got here one of these nice medals. One of these nice medals here as well, just for participating.
Yeah.
They do a great job, and Ed does a phenomenal job with it. But
It was a great
yeah,
time.
yeah.
And this is of course the plot of this latest book, where you have we won't give away too much, but Nick, who is kind of typically the comic relief in the books, is practicing to be in the Moose Call contest
Yeah.
in Indian Lake, and we won't say what happens, but wackiness ensues.
Yes, it does.
And so now you have this additional street cred that that if the writing thing doesn't work out, you always have moose calling to fall back on.
Yeah, but Justin mentioned earlier about the loon call contest at our Adirondack Kids Day, and we had 3 judges, one of which was a retired ranger. And we told that little story of what happened at the moose call contest. And a woman came up afterwards and said, "Oh, you've got to do a moose call for me." And it's been several weeks now. I don't have the videos. So I do the little moose call, right? And turning red. And she leaves and the ranger looks at me and goes, "And you won with that?" I said, "Well, something like that. It was something like that."
So I should not ask you to do your moose call now? Is that what you're saying?
That was the method to my madness there. Yeah, just no question on. Let's hear the moose.
We've got a couple of questions actually on our online Q&A from Anthony, who says, and I think it's an interesting question considering one of the goals that you have for this book series is to kind of get kids off of their electronic devices. But he wants to know, do you see forms of social media like YouTube and podcasts and TikTok? And, Justin, I know you're a podcaster yourself. Do these things come into play with your writings as a form of getting things across to your audience? Is there some room for social media and electronics as a way to get kids to take up reading a good old-fashioned paperback book?
We try to avoid putting technology in our stories. Not only because it changes so much, learned a lot from Beverly Cleary. Have the 2-volume autobiography by her and the things that she learned early on in her writing career, and how Henry Huggins and Ramona and so on have lived on for so long and not gone out of print after decades. Yep. But also to keep the social media out to encourage kids to see what's there. We had a phone, a cell phone in the second book, which of course didn't work in the mountain, and so it made a quick appearance and disappeared. But yeah, I mean, we utilize social media, but
Yeah. So social media is a great tool for um, spreading the message that we want to get to people. It definitely, we don't want to be totally anti-social media. We think it's a good tool if used well, if used wisely, and if people don't become addicted, everybody's addicted to their phones and to computers and YouTube and everything else. And so, yeah, there's definitely there's a place for it, and we definitely want to utilize social media as a way to reach people. Obviously, that the ability to reach to talk to you right now, for example, is just a tool that would be silly not to take advantage of. But we want to tell we don't want to produce so much content that people spend all their time uh, watching us on screens, right? We want to get them off their screens more and enjoying. And we have a drone that we've used to shoot footage of the Adirondacks, and hopefully we can use some of that footage to inspire people to be like, wow, look how beautiful that is. If you go outside, it's better than 4K. You can actually get out there and see it. So, yeah, definitely a useful tool for that.
yeah, when kids come up there, I mean, between, the paddling, right? Canoes and kayaks and swimming and fishing and hiking and, the things that you see that are there. That's what well, I say we encourage it, but you get some young people up there outdoors, you know, and it's almost like when I was growing up, you spent so much time outdoors, just enjoying uh, what's out there. So that's how we really try to steer people and the kids.
You mentioned early on that teaching kids the importance of being a good storyteller, being able to write is one of the goals of what you do. And I know a lot of writers and artists talk about the importance of failure when they're pursuing an art form. How do you teach young people to embrace just the work, the joy of just doing the writing versus the output, and to take comfort in the process rather than, winning awards for their finished work?
Mhm. Yeah, teachers do all the grunt work, right? I mean, when we go into school to speak, we get to do kind of the fun stuff, right? And we do. We just try to inspire. We try to, well, it's real. I mean, we're telling the truth, right? About the writing process and what it can be, and what it can look like. But yeah, we don't spare the fact that there's grunt work involved too. We like to talk about what's the glue we talk
Yeah,
about?
yeah, we regularly give an illustration to kids that they're going to go home after school, and a lot of times they'll sit and they'll watch TV for half an hour or whatever, and we'll tell them, like, if you take that half an hour before you sit down and watch TV to sit down in your chair and write, what are you going to have after 3 months? And we tell them they need to go to the hardware store and get a tube of butt glue that they can put on their chair, and it dissolves after 30 minutes of writing, and then they can
Yeah.
get up and go play with their friends, and that always gets a chuckle. But yeah, it's important. They need, if they want to accomplish something, like writing a book, it's going to take time and effort, and they have to dedicate time each day, or several times a week at least, to getting those things done, because otherwise they won't
And it can
they
be
won't get it done.
poetry, it can be song lyrics, it can be a short
Illustrations,
story,
yeah.
it can be, it's not just writing a book, there's so many different ways to use writing. And like Justin said, after a couple of months, if you just took a few minutes a day, what do you have to show for it versus sitting and watching a rerun, on a television show or something after 3 months, that kind of thing. It
Yeah.
resonates with some and, not with others, but that's what we try to encourage.
Well, and Justin, do you feel like doing this when you were a young person gave you a leg up in your ability to succeed in school? Did you feel like you already knew something about narrative when you got to high school, and suddenly you were assigned to do this and not just doing
Yeah.
it with your dad?
So my dad's a type A personality, and I am a type B personality, and so I do not have the same high intensity work ethic that he does with certain things. I do in some things, but not another thing. He'll do it with everything. Um, but that definitely helped. So when I was in elementary school and middle school, when we would do writing, after our books came out, my teachers would allow me to do more advanced writing in my stories than my peers, which was nice, because it allowed me to be a little bit more creative and things like that. But then when I got older in my college years, for example, I would always, and I don't recommend this, but I would always wait till pretty much the last possible hour before something was due, an essay was due of some sort. And then I would finally hammer it out, and I always got an A or a B plus or an A plus even. It was not difficult to do the writing portions of things at all. Now I'm not gifted in math and engineering, things like that. I'm terrible at that. But with regard to the reading and the writing things that were assigned to me, or in terms of my jobs when I've had to write for work and things like that, it's definitely been a tremendous help, because it's a lot more second nature now. It's like riding a bike, when something needs to get done, and it's not going to come out like crap after only spending a few minutes on it. So yeah, it's been a huge help, huge advantage.
Well, and Gary, you were talking just a minute ago about the idea that, it's important to just do this as a practice. And you said you were a basketball coach. And, in a lot of ways, people talk about writing as exercising a certain muscle in your brain. And that must have translated to some degree for you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Discipline, right? And actually, Madeline L'Engle, another great writer, right? Wrinkle in Time and just so many books. Um, she said that anybody that says that they can teach a creative writing to run from them. She said it's like writing is like practicing a craft. You've got to, know the fundamentals and keep working at the fundamentals. When I read Annie Dillard and I find out she's a technical writer, I mean, it's so fluid. It just, her descriptions and stuff, it's incredible. But then to find out she works in a very technical way. Um, so yeah, it's like any craft, and the more you do it and the more you read, because reading also is practicing writing. And that's another thing that we let kids know. You get a twofer when you're reading, because you're not only reading about the subject or enjoying a story or whatever, but you're also practicing writing. You're seeing how to punctuate, you're seeing how to write sentences, you're seeing how to write paragraphs. You're seeing what great writers always do and what holds your attention and what they never do. So yeah, reading and just practicing the craft over time.
We tell them that these are all writers' workshops that they can get from their library. If they want to learn to write, go
Yeah,
to the library.
yeah.
Well, and along those lines, I mean, I think a lot of people might recognize the Hardy Boys series over your left shoulder there, Justin. But there are a lot of other books, and I gather there are quite a few other children's book characters who have spent some time in the Adirondacks that either directly inspire or certainly, kind of underpin what happens in these Adirondack Kids books.
Yeah. When we started, well, maybe 2 or 3 years after writing, I wondered how many other children's books were set in the Adirondacks, or the Adirondacks get a shout out in their work. And then I discovered that I was ready for that question. I found out that the Hardy Boys, here, hold some of these up. The Hardy Boys have been in the Adirondacks, right? The Hardy Boys have been in the Adirondacks. Tom Swift has been in the Adirondacks. Nancy Drew has been in the Adirondacks. The Boxcar Children have been in the Adirondacks. And Samantha of the American Girl series, Samantha Saves the Day, and The Cry of the Loon, also set in the Adirondacks, this character. And this book actually has a nonfiction section at the end, and it's got photographs courtesy of the Adirondack Museum right there in Blue Mountain.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I have about 150 books, children's books set in the Adirondacks from the late 1800s, every decade unto now. So I was amazed to to find, you know, that many books set in the Adirondacks, children's
Wow.
books set in the Adirondacks. Very cool.
That is very cool.
Yeah.
And it must be a little bit like when you discover another one. I mean, I would think if I were a kid reading and I, you know, got into my mom's old Nancy Drew books or, you know, Hardy Boys books or whatever, coming across an Adirondack reference would be like a little Easter egg for them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Um, You mentioned just a second ago the little nonfiction section at the end of the American Girl book. There are likewise nonfiction sections in your books as well. What is it? Why is it important to have these kind of, I don't know, reframings of the stories in the last, you know, 30 or 40 pages of your books?
Yeah, well, each of our stories is set around a real person, place, or thing, which I imagine is why a lot of schools like to use our books in their fourth and fifth grade curriculums. And so we decided when we wrote our book that it would be helpful to have a section in the back. We call it Dax Facts. And we talk about the things that we wrote about. We put real facts that people can check out about the things that we've written. And it helps educate the people. Like when we did book number one, you know, we had a 35mm film camera be used. And of course, no one on planet Earth knows what that is now unless they're into photography. And so we put a section in the back, you know, talking about film cameras and things like that. So it's a way to not only teach, um, to not only teach about what's going on in the stories, but just teaching about the Adirondacks and nature and all these things that we care so much about. So it's been a good,
Yeah.
good thing to do.
People have been, as the years went by, people were telling us that they were planning their vacations around stories in the book to go and visit the places, you know. And over time, things have changed here and there, you know, around the park. But yeah, it's been a wild ride.
As writers, that must be a really powerful feeling to realize that you've not just entertained somebody for, you know, a couple, 2, 3, 4, 5 nights of reading, but you've also influenced things that they didn't know they were interested in until they read them.
Honestly, been very humbling. Seriously, you know,
Yeah.
some of the mail we get and where people have visited and experiences they've had with their kids and their grandkids, you know, and they write to us and tell us about it. And it's, you know, it's very humbling. Yeah.
Speaking of grandkids, I believe there is one in the green room as we're having this conversation who
Yeah,
there it
who
is.
might get co-author credit on the next
Yeah,
book.
if you want
All right.
to grab them.
I'll go grab him.
So my son, Levi Judah VanRiper, is 8 years old, and my dad had mentioned that Levi saw a PBS event that my dad and I did on TV, and he said, "I'm going to write a story with you, just like you did with my dad." And so he decided to do that. This is Levi.
Hey, Levi.
Levi, why don't you tell them about the story that you are writing with
How it
Papa?
started.
Yes. So, well, we're probably
Do you
gonna...
have it? Let me ask you the important thing. Does it have a title yet?
Yes. In fact, I got the page right here to not forget. Well, we got it. Chonky the Space Seal, Special Agent Investigator with the Epsilon Eridani Space Force. The frightful flight of the Friendship spaceship. So far is
It's a
what
working
we got.
title.
And
Yes.
this sounds like it might not take place in the Adirondacks.
Yes, no, it does not. In fact, it takes place in, guess what?
Outer space?
Outer space, yes, outer space. Yeah. So
This is the cover artwork so far.
Wow.
Where is this located? What solar system is this in?
Epsilon Eridani solar system. It's a real solar system. Very close to ours. Like actually, it's the closest one we kind of know of. And a lot of things are actually set set in it. Right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so a lot of stories are.
Who are these main characters here that you have?
Oh yeah, there's Chunky, then there's Dr. Bad Bad. They're all
Is
kind of
Chonky a walrus by any chance?
No, he is a seal. He has
Oh.
changed a lot. He does not look much like that, as you can see in the title. He kind of changed a little bit.
Oh yeah, kind of. Yep, I can see that. But that's a whale there too, right?
Right here.
So yeah, that's a orca, yeah.
Very nice.
And all of the things that kind of started it, I'm gonna go get the thing that actually started it. Yes,
Okay.
this.
So,
This started it.
what is this?
So this is a imaginative structure for young storytellers.
It's basically a card.
It's
Game.
full of cards, and you kind of roll that dice, and it kind of tells you what section and what animal you're gonna get to kind of start your pretend story. Well, we did like some, like not that much, but like a page, like a tiny page of the start of a story. It was nothing like what we have now, but that is what started it. Yes, that is definitely what started it all.
Well, and is it fun to work with your grandpa on the story?
Yes, yes, very, very. And I mean, we actually almost got, well, we got all the writing done, basically. We're just waiting for the illustrations to come in.
Now, how much do you tell him what to write, and how much does he tell you what to write?
Well, earlier my dad was saying that he used to tell everybody, or Papa, when he did something incorrect or wrote a word incorrect. Every 10 seconds, he yelled at him. I'm the exact same way. I do that all the time too. Whenever
So you're a pretty good speller then?
Well, no. I used little red underliner that is under words when you spell them incorrectly.
Oh, nice.
Tell them, you spelled that word incorrectly. You gotta fix that.
Come on, the spell check is telling you to fix it.
Yes.
So it must be pretty cool though to be you're 8. Is that how old you are?
8, yes.
8. Yep. So you're going to be a published author when you're 8 years old.
That's really,
That's pretty amazing.
really weird to think about, honestly.
Well, congratulations, Levi. That's I bet it'll be neat to be able to bring that book into to show your friends.
Yeah, it's gonna be something when I do that.
Well, we just have a couple minutes left. I wanted to share, Anthony's shared a moose haiku with us. And I don't know, Levi, if you know what a haiku is, but it's a really short poem. It goes, moose on the loose. The moose ran amok while the caboose led the search. Still, the moose is loose.
It's a
Okay.
great haiku.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he also wanted to know if either of you were fans of Charlotte's Web by E.B. White, which is a children's classic and an animal classic.
It's a classic.
I'm not big on spiders.
Heights are fine. Spiders are that's where we cross the line.
We don't do that here.
I can remember getting weepy when I was young and I read that story.
Yeah, me too. Me
It really
too.
was, you know, yeah, it's a real classic.
Did either of you ever expect when you sat down to write Adirondack Kids #1 that you would still be talking about this 25 years later?
No way.
No, not
No
a
way.
chance. I mean, we did risk it, right? We put a 1 on the side of the first one, so we figured we're at least committed to a sequel. But to do one a year for as long as we have, and to have sold over 170 something thousand books, and it's just been totally unexpected and a huge blessing. We're very grateful.
We have one last question that Kathy has snuck in under the wire. Was the train robbery real?
Both the train in Old Forge and in North Creek at the time. They had train robberies, right? So we just got the idea. What if one of those train robberies where everybody on the train's just having a good time and laughing and so on, and they're giving the robbers this and that, what if it actually ended up being a real robbery? So that's what inspired the story. Yeah.
That's great. Before we wrap up, you have this new story that you're working on with Levi. Are there still Adirondack Kids stories that are in the works?
We actually there are some short stories. One of them's done. It might be a collection of short stories. We thought that maybe was what was going to happen with 21, but then the Moose Call contest just wrote itself. So it's possible that there could be another collection of short stories, or if another idea that really seems to lend itself to an entire book. So it's on the table. Yeah.
It is amazing to think, and I know Joe, who introduced us this evening, said he was a fan from way back. But when you think about it, your earliest readers have grown up and gotten through college and are having kids of their own, and
We meet them. We get to meet them. I mean, they'll come up to us, and do selfies with us.
Wow.
I read your books. I read that one, or they'll buy the book for their young one. Yeah, it's been.
This is the real Justin. He's here.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, and my dog in the back is apparently a big fan as well, and has somehow crashed through the baby gate that I had, keeping her in the other room. So I will wrap this up by saying, Gary and Justin VanRiper, it has been a real delight to chat with you. Congratulations on this latest book, and Levi, congratulations to you on the book that's coming out soon. And we'll turn things back over to Joe Dolan.
Thanks so much, Mitch.
Thank you.
Thanks. And you too, Joe. Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us, Gary, Justin, and Levi. And thank you, Mitch, for a great conversation. Thank you to all of you for joining us this evening. We'll reconvene for the next book in the series after the new year. We'll have Thatcher Hogan. He has a new book out on surveyors Verplank, Colvin, and Mills Blake. So some more Adirondack adventurers out there. But for more information and register for all of our events, the adkx.org/events is where to go. We're closed for the season here in Blue Mountain Lake. We've got snow on the ground, but stay connected with us online on social media and our website and whatnot. So you can find a recording of this program on our YouTube within 24 hours. So with that, from all of us Adirondack Experience, have a good night. We'll see you all later.